During Thanksgiving, they emptied my little account. My family laughed, thinking they just dipped into some forgotten savings. They didn't know that account was a test. They didn't know that an entire banking empire backed my little account, and that empire had a very different opinion on the matter. My name is Scarlett Garcia. I am 32 years old, and for the last 10 years, I have lived in Chicago, but I was born in Maple Glen, Ohio, and on Thanksgiving, you go home. The drive is a 6-hour decompression, or perhaps a recompression, back into a person I no longer am. The skyline of Chicago, all steel and glass and ambition, dissolves in the rearview mirror, replaced by the endless flat gray of the I-90. Maple Glen is not a town you visit. It's a town you revert to. The air itself feels thicker, slower, smelling of damp leaves and the faint, sweet rot from the sugar beet plant miles away. I pull my 10-year-old sedan onto the cracked driveway, the same one I learned to ride a bike on. The house is exactly as I left it. The same faded vinyl siding, the same overgrown rose bushes, the same American flag drooping from the porch. Inside, the heat is cranked up to 75 degrees. The television in the living room is blasting a football game the Lions are losing. As is tradition, my father is already half asleep in his recliner, a can of cheap light beer sweating onto a stack of old mail. The dining room table is crammed with family: my mother, Linda, my younger brother, Jason, and his wife, Kelsey, my Aunt Cheryl, and Uncle Mike. The smell is overwhelmingly savory dry turkey, instant mashed potatoes, and green bean casserole made with canned mushroom soup. It is the smell of obligation. Scarlett, honey, my mother chirps, wiping her hands on an apron. You look thin. Chicago's starving you. Hi, Mom. Everything smells familiar. We settle in. The plates are passed, the rhythm of the day taking over. The conversation is the same recycled script. Uncle Mike complains about the government. Aunt Cheryl asks Kelsey, again, when she's going to get pregnant. And then, as always, the spotlight turns to me. So, Scar, Jason starts, mouthful of stuffing. Are you still driving that old thing I thought you financed people who made bank? It runs fine, Jason. And that apartment, Kelsey adds, her voice dripping with faux concern. It's just so tiny. I saw pictures on social media. How do you even breathe in there? It's 620 square feet. Kelsey, it's fine for one person. If you say so, she murmurs. Exchanging a look with Jason, this is their favorite ritual. My tiny apartment, my old car. They are the anchors they use to keep me tethered to them. To prove that despite my Chicago job, I haven't really gotten ahead. It makes them feel comfortable. It makes them feel entitled. My mother waits for a lull when the quarterback on TV is sacking the ref's commentary. Well, I'm just glad we finally got the kitchen sorted, Linda announces to the table at large. The quartz countertops are being installed Tuesday. That's wonderful. Mom, I say, pushing a kernel of corn around my plate. It really is, and I have you to thank for it. Honey, the room doesn't go silent. That would be too dramatic. The conversation just shifts. Focusing on me, I feel the weight of their collective gaze. A cold knot tightens in my stomach. Me why? Oh, you know. She waves her fork. A piece of turkey stuck to the tines. Just that little emergency account we still share. Your old college one. I knew you wouldn't mind. The contractor needed the deposit right away. And things have just been so tight. She smiles. A bright, oblivious smile. As if she just told me she'd used one of my coupons at the grocery store. Around the table, heads nod in agreement. It is a foregone conclusion. Of course I wouldn't mind. I place my silverware down, very gently, on the edge of the plate. Which account? Mom, the one at the Maple Glen branch. That's the one, she says brightly. And how much? I ask, my voice perfectly flat. Did the contractor need... Oh, goodness. She taps her chin, pretending to think. It was just under 19,000, 18,500, something like that. A drop in the bucket for you. Honey, we all know what you must be making up there in the big city. $18,000. She says it's like $18. Spare change, Uncle Mike mutters into his beer. Exactly, Jason says, pointing his knife at me. It's not like you even used that account. It was just sitting there. We actually helped her figure out the online transfer, Kelsey chimes in, laying her hand on my mother's arm. We knew you'd be thrilled to help. Scarlett, family helps family. That's what you do. I stare at them. The three of them, Linda, Jason, Kelsey, a united front of loving thieves. You helped her, I repeat. Scarlett, don't make it weird, Jason snaps, his good-natured mask slipping. Mom needed it. You have plenty. It's simple. I pull out my phone. The atmosphere finally cracks. The friendly chatter stops. Oh, for heaven's sake, Linda sighs, rolling her eyes. Don't be dramatic. Scarlett, it's Thanksgiving. We're family. I'm just checking something, I say. My fingers are steady. I ignore the standard banking app they all use. I open a discrete icon, one that looks like a simple notes application. It requires a 24-character alphanumeric password and a biometric scan. It's the portal to my actual network. I navigate to Legacy Holdings. There it is, the joint account at Maple Glen Community Bank. I'd kept it open for exactly this reason, a small, unassuming trap, baited with just enough money to look like normal savings. A test of their character, one they had just failed spectacularly. I saw the wire transfer from 3 days ago, $18,512, but I don't stop scrolling. My blood turns to ice. It wasn't just the one transfer. I see a withdrawal from 2 weeks ago, $3,000. One from a month before that, $5,000, and before that, a steady drip $500, $800, $1,000, $200. It goes back 6 months. They hadn't just taken a piece. They had been slowly, systematically draining me, confident I would never notice the spare change. You look sick, honey, my mother says, her voice laced with that cloying, false concern. It's just money. We'll pay you back when we can. You wired over $18,000, I say, my voice dangerously quiet. Without my authorization, Jason actually scoffs. Authorization. It's a joint account. Scarlett, Mom's name is right there on it. What's the problem? The problem, I say, pushing my chair back and standing up. Is that what you call helping and borrowing is defined by the federal government as bank fraud? The word hangs in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Fraud, Linda gasps, placing a hand over her heart. Her face contorts into practiced outrage. How dare you speak to your mother that way after everything I've done for you? Family doesn't steal. Scarlett, Aunt Cheryl says, her voice sharp as a splinter. Family borrows. You do well to remember that. They are all staring at me, their expressions a mix of anger and disbelief. In their eyes, I am the one committing the transgression. I am the one breaking the code. I fold my napkin and place it on the table, next to my uneaten food. Excuse me, I have an urgent work call I need to take. Work, Jason says, his voice filled with contempt. On Thanksgiving, that's your problem. Scar, you're so cold. You care more about your job than your own family. This one can't wait, I say. I walk out of the dining room. I ignore my mother's rising voice. You get back here, young lady. We are not finished. I walk down the hall to my father's old office. It's a museum of his failed small businesses, dusty binders of Amway catalogs from the 1990s, an ancient beige computer tower, stacks of faded tax returns. It smells like old paper and disappointment. I step inside, close the heavy oak door, and turn the deadbolt. The click of the lock settling into place is the first clean, honest sound I've heard all day. I stand in the dark for a moment, breathing. The rage is there, a cold, clean fire. But beneath it is the familiar, crushing weight of realization. This was the last chance. I pull out my phone. I don't call the customer service number for the Maple Glen Bank. I don't dial 911. I access my secure directory and press a single speed dial number. It connects directly to the Ironcrest Meridian Bank, Global Risk and Security Operations Center in Chicago. It rings once. A crisp, professional voice answers. Risk Center. Hale speaking. I take one more breath, and the last shred of Scarlet from Maple Glen falls away. The voice that answers is not the voice of a daughter. It is the voice of a CEO. It is the voice of the person who owns the bank they just stole from. This is CEO Garcia, I say, my tone pure ice. I am initiating a red flag protocol on a domestic breach. I want to see exactly how our system handles a violation when the perpetrators are my own family. Monday morning in Chicago is a different universe than a Sunday night in Maple Glen. The air here doesn't smell of old regrets and sugar beets. It smells of cold wind off Lake Michigan and the ozone scent of high-speed data centers. I walk into the lobby of the Ironcrest Tower at 7 in the morning. The building is 50 stories of blue-tinted glass that slices into the gray sky, a monolith of capital in the heart of the loop. I am wearing my usual work attire, a charcoal suit, well-tailored but unbranded, and low heels, no jewelry, no designer bag. The security guard, a massive man named O'Malley, who has worked here for 20 years, straightens up as I approach the turnstiles. "Good morning, Ms. Garcia," he says, nodding respectfully. "Morning, O'Malley. How's the knee?" "Better with the weather turning, ma'am. Thank you for asking." He doesn't know I own the building. He doesn't know I own the bank that leases 30 of the 50 floors, to him, and to 99% of the people who work here. I am Ms. Garcia, a senior consultant who works on the 35th floor, a woman who keeps her head down, does good work, and never attends the holiday parties. I swipe my badge. The light turns green. I step into the private elevator, the one that requires a retinal scan to even call. The doors slide shut, sealing out the noise of the lobby. As the car accelerates upward, my stomach does not drop. It settles. This is my domain. This is where the rules are written in ink and code, not in guilt and passive-aggressive sighs. My family thinks I am a financial analyst. They think I crunch numbers for other people's portfolios. They are partially right. I crunch numbers, but the portfolio is mine. Ironcrest Meridian is a mid-sized commercial bank with a heavy footprint in the Midwest. On paper, a consortium of investors owns it. In reality, through a labyrinth of shell companies, trusts, and holding entities, specifically an entity called Garcia Ridge Holdings, I control 51% of the voting stock. I step out onto the 42nd floor. This isn't the open plan trading floor with shouting brokers. This is the nervous system of the bank, risk and internal security. The air is cooler here, the hum of servers audible beneath the floorboards. Marcus Hale is waiting for me in the secure conference room. The glass walls are frosted. Nothing gets out. Marcus is the director of internal security, a man who spent 15 years in forensic accounting for the FBI before I poached him. He wears shirts that are perfectly pressed and an expression that suggests he has seen every variety of human greed. "Ms. Garcia," he says, standing as I enter. He doesn't offer a hand. We are past pleasantries. "I pulled the logs you asked for on Saturday night." "Show me," I say, taking the seat at the head of the table. Marcus taps his tablet, and the wall-sized screen comes to life. It displays a timeline of transactions, jagged red lines cutting across a clean white grid. "The account in question is a legacy joint savings account," Marcus begins, his voice clinical. "Opened 14 years ago at the Maple Glen branch. Primary holder Linda Garcia. Secondary holder Scarlett Garcia. Inactive for 7 years until 6 months ago. The $18,000 transfer," I say. "Walk me through the authorization." Marcus expands a section of the data. "It was initiated in person at the branch. Standard withdrawal slip. Signature verification was bypassed." Bypassed. The teller overrode the system alert. The amount exceeded the $10,000 federal reporting threshold for cash. Though this was a wire, the system flagged it because the secondary holder you had not accessed the account in years and the address on file for you is out of state. The protocol requires verbal confirmation from both parties for a dormant account reactivation of this size. "Who was the teller?" I ask, though I have a sinking feeling I already know. Marcus swipes the screen. A personnel file appears. Emily Ward, junior associate. She's been with the branch for 9 months. I stare at the photo. Emily. My second cousin is on my father's side. I remember her sending me a Facebook message a year ago, asking if I could put in a good word for her because she needed a steady job. I had sent a generic email to HR, asking them to treat her application fairly. I didn't get her the job, but she clearly thinks I did, and now she is paying back the favor by helping my mother rob me. She used a manager override code, Marcus continues. But here's the interesting part. The manager wasn't in the building at the time. Emily logged in with the manager's credentials to approve her own transaction. I lean back, steepling my fingers. So we have unauthorized access, sharing of credentials, and failure to adhere to know your customer protocols. If this were a random client, what would we do? Marcus looks me dead in the eye. We would freeze the assets immediately. We would launch a forensic audit of the entire branch. We would file suspicious activity reports with FinCEN. And we would terminate the employee and refer the case to local law enforcement for potential prosecution. Then that is exactly what we are going to do, I say. Marcus pauses. Ms. Garcia, with respect, if we do this by the book, your name is on the account. It will become a matter of public record. If the local DA picks it up, it becomes a case study. Bank CEO robs own mother, or family feud destroys local branch. The optics are messy. No, I corrected him. The headline is, Bank enforces zero-tolerance policy on internal fraud regardless of connections, but I don't want my name attached to the enforcement yet. Process this as Client X. Treat the account holder me as a high-net-worth individual whose identity is redacted for security reasons. I want the system to crush them. Marcus, not me, the system. Understood. Client X protocol initiated. I unlock my laptop and connect to the secure dashboard. I need to see the full picture. I type in my 64-character key. The screen floods with green data. My family sees a girl driving a 2015 Honda Civic. They see a girl who wears clothes from Target and lives in a studio apartment. On the screen, I see the truth. Under the Garcia Ridge Holdings umbrella, the assets scroll by. Ironcrest Meridian Equity, $212 million. Distressed debt portfolios purchased in 2020, $45 million. Municipal bonds, $30 million. Venture capital stakes in fintech startups, $85 million. Real estate holdings, strictly commercial, $70 million. Total personal net worth fluctuates, but today it sits comfortably above $450 million. I built this. I built it while eating ramen in a dorm room. I built it while my mother was buying lottery tickets, and my brother was financing a truck he couldn't afford. I built it by understanding that money isn't currency. It is leverage. I remember the day I decided to hide it. It was 5 years ago. I had just closed my first major acquisition. I bought a Porsche. I took it home for Christmas. Within an hour, my uncle asked for a loan for a business idea involving alpacas. My cousin asked if I could pay off her student loans. My mother asked why I hadn't bought her a house yet. They didn't see my hard work. They saw a winning lottery ticket they felt entitled to cash. So I sold the Porsche. I bought a Honda. I rented the tiny apartment through a shell company. I created a character, Scarlett the struggling analyst. And suddenly, they stopped asking for money. They started pitying me instead. And I realized I preferred their pity to their greed. It felt safer. But safety is an illusion. There is one more thing, Marcus says, interrupting my thoughts. His voice has dropped an octave. I dug deeper into the access logs for the online banking portal, the web logins. Go on. We track the IP addresses accessing the joint account. Most are from your mother's home router. That is expected. But look at the timestamps on these logins from last month. He points to a cluster of data points. These logins occurred at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and then again at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. They were done using Emily Ward's employee credentials, but from an external IP address. She's working from home, I ask. That's against protocol for junior staff. No, Marcus says. The IP address doesn't belong to Emily Ward. It resolves to a residential address in Maple Glen. He taps the screen again. An address pops up, 422 Oak Street. My blood runs cold. I know that address. That is my brother's house, I whisper. Correct, Marcus says. Jason Garcia, it appears your cousin Emily didn't just bypass protocol at the branch. She gave her employee login credentials to your brother. He has been logging into the bank's internal portal from his living room. He wasn't just checking the balance. Scarlett, he was looking at other accounts. The silence in the room is heavy, suffocating. This wasn't just my mother needing a new kitchen. This wasn't just borrowing. My brother, Jason, had administrative access to the bank's internal system. He was looking at customer data. He was exploring. He was looking for what? I ask. We don't know yet, Marcus says. But the audit logs show he viewed balances for 3 other accounts. All of them belong to elderly neighbors on your parents' street. I close my eyes. The image of the Thanksgiving table flashes in my mind. Jason pointing his knife at me. Family helps family. They aren't just thieves. They are predators. And they are using my bank, my infrastructure, to hunt. This is no longer a domestic dispute, I say. Opening my eyes, the cold fire is back, hotter than before. This is a federal crime, unauthorized access to a financial institution, computer fraud, identity theft. Yes, Marcus agrees. If we move forward, Jason goes to prison. Emily goes to prison. Your mother, depending on how much she knew, could be looking at conspiracy charges. I look at the screen. I look at the millions of dollars that represent my life's work, and then I look at the $18,000 that represents their betrayal. Do it, I say. Trigger the fraud investigation, lock down Emily's terminal, but don't alert the branch manager yet. I want to see how deep the rot goes. If Emily felt comfortable giving her login to my brother, she didn't learn that behavior in a vacuum. Someone at that branch taught her that rules are suggestions. And your family? Marcus asks. When will their cards stop working? When will the accounts freeze? Let them think it's a glitch, I say, standing up and smoothing my skirt. Let them call customer service. Let them scream. When they call me, I won't answer. I'm just a struggling analyst in a tiny apartment. Remember, what could I possibly do to help? I walk to the door. Marcus, I say, pausing with my hand on the frame. One more thing. Yes, Ms. Garcia. That $18,000, when you file the insurance claim for the fraud loss, make sure you list the victim as Iron Crest Meridian Bank. Not me. They didn't steal from Scarlett. They stole from the house. And the house always wins. This isn't the first time. The data on my screen blurs. The clean lines of code and transaction logs dissolving into a memory from 14 years ago. I am 19 years old. Sitting on the thin, scratchy mattress of my dorm room, I am staring at an email from the bursar's office. Final notice. Tuition past due. My stomach is a cold, hollow pit. My scholarship covered 70%. I had worked 2 jobs all summer, waitressing and lifeguarding. To save the rest, I had saved $8,500. I had put it in a joint account with my mother, the one she insisted we open just in case of emergencies. I called her from a payphone in the hallway, my voice shaking. Mom, the tuition, the money's gone from the account. Did you move it? Silence on the line, not a good silence, a heavy, guilty silence. Linda, Mom, where is the money? Oh, stop being so dramatic. Scarlett. Her voice finally came, sharp and defensive. I had to temporarily borrow it. The visa bill was just astronomical this month. You know your father's commission checks. Borrow it, Mom. That was my tuition. It's due today. They're going to drop me from my classes. Well, I'll pay it back. I just need a little time. A few weeks. I don't have a few weeks. I was crying then. Hot, humiliated tears. I'll be kicked out. Now you listen to me. Her voice turned cold. The voice she used when she was cornered. I have housed you and fed you and clothed you for 19 years. I have sacrificed everything for you and your brother. And you're going to stand there and count pennies with me over a little bit of money. After everything I've done, I spent the next 48 hours begging the financial aid office for an extension, negotiating a high-interest emergency loan, and taking on a third job at the library. She never paid it back, not 1 cent. That was the day I learned that family is just a word people use to justify theft. It was the fire that burned away the part of me that I trusted. It was the fuel I used to build an empire. I closed the memory and opened my eyes. I am back in my office in the Iron Crest Tower. The past is the past, but the pattern is the present. As Miss Garcia, the analyst, I have a nominal supervisor. His name is Patrick Doyle, the Executive Vice President of Risk Management. Patrick is a man who wears $300 ties and has a perfectly manicured handshake. He is a master of corporate politics, a man who believes his job is not to solve problems, but to manage their visibility. I request a 5-minute meeting. Walking down the hall to his expansive corner office, he is on the phone, laughing, and gestures for me to sit. He finishes his call, something about a golf game, and swivels his high-backed leather chair to face me. "Scarlett, good to see you. Glad you survived the holiday. What's on your mind, quickly, if you can?" "I'm buried." I keep my voice in the respectful, slightly stressed tone of a mid-level employee. "Patrick, I need to file an internal report. It's regarding a breach at the Maple Glen branch. It's a bit sensitive. It involves my own joint account." I give him the 30-second summary, the unauthorized withdrawal, the dormant account, the bypassed protocols. I do not mention my brother. I do not mention the credentials. I present it as a simple, albeit large, employee error. Patrick's smile doesn't falter, but his eyes go flat. He's annoyed. This is not a billion-dollar derivatives model. This is a small, messy, human problem. Maple Glen. He sighs, as if I'd mentioned something unpleasant he'd stepped in. "Right, one of our rural acquisitions. Look, Scarlett." He leans forward, his voice dropping into a confidential, man-to-man tone he probably thinks is reassuring. "I appreciate you bringing this to compliance. But it's Thanksgiving. It's family. You know how these things are. Are you sure you want to blow this up?" The employee didn't follow protocol. "Patrick, $18,000. 18,000. He waves his hand, a dismissive flick of his wrist. "We're a $30 billion bank. We spill more than that in coffee every quarter. What I'm saying is, if this is just your mother getting her hands in the cookie jar, why not just handle it? Get her to put the money back. Have a word with the teller. Do we really need to get the auditors involved? We're trying to keep our risk metrics clean for the end-of-year report." There it is. He isn't worried about the bank's security. He isn't worried about the customer me. He is worried about a red mark on his perfect, pristine report. He is worried that an investigation will make him look bad. "It just seems like a lot of paperwork," he continues, "for what is, at its heart, a family spat. We deal with bigger things here. Garcia, let's keep our eye on the ball." I nod slowly, letting him think he's convinced me. "I understand. Patrick, thank you for the perspective. I'll reconsider the formal complaint." "That's the spirit," he says, smiling, already turning back to his monitor. "Let's not make a mountain out of a Maple Glen molehill. Close the door on your way out." I walk out of his office, my face a mask of calm obedience, but inside, a new strategy is forming. Patrick doesn't see the risk. He is the risk. He and men like him, the ones who tell tellers to be flexible, who prioritize sales metrics over security, who dismiss customer complaints as spats. They are the ones who create the environment where people like my mother and brother can thrive. My family was the breach, but Patrick is the vulnerability, and I just realized this investigation isn't just about them, it's about him. I go back to my desk. My secure line rings. It's not Marcus. It's an internal transfer from the Maple Glen branch. I let it ring twice, then answer. "Garcia?" "Scarlett." "Oh, thank God. Thank God." It's Emily. She is hysterical, sobbing so hard she can barely speak. "Scarlett, you have to help me. They're going to fire me. They're going to arrest me. What happened? Emily, I ask, my voice cold. My terminal, it's locked. It just went red, and the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, came out and told me to go to the conference room and wait. He said internal security from Chicago is on the line. Scarlett, what did you do? I'm going to lose my job. You approved a fraudulent withdrawal. Emily, what did you think would happen? But it wasn't fraud, she shrieks. Aunt Linda swore you said it was okay. She said you two talked about it, that you wanted to help with the kitchen. I was just helping, family. You bypassed 3 security protocols. Emily, you used a manager's override code. I know, but Mr. Henderson, he's always telling us to be customer first and not get bogged down in red tape, especially with family. He says, family access is just good community banking. It's how we build relationships. I freeze. What did you just say? Family access? Yeah, she sniffles, desperate to find an excuse. It's a thing we do here, If a wife calls in for her husband's balance, or a son needs to move money for his mom, we're encouraged to be flexible. It helps our customer engagement numbers. Everyone does it. I didn't think you, of all people, would make a big deal. My blood runs cold. This is it. This is the systemic rot. It's not a bug, it's a feature. They are training their employees to commit fraud and calling it customer engagement. My family wasn't an isolated case. They were just the ones bold enough to do it to me. Scarlett, are you there? Please, you have to call them off. I'll lose my license. Jason, he told me you were cold, but I didn't think you were this cruel. Thank you, Emily, I say. You've been very helpful. I hung up. I don't care that she's crying. I turn back to my terminal. My family is a symptom. Patrick Doyle has the disease. The Maple Glen branch is the first infection. I open the analytics dashboard. I filter for all branches with a similar demographic to Maple Glen Rural. Legacy banking systems. High populations of elderly clients. I ran a query. Select. From transactions where withdrawal amount 500 and joint account access equals secondary user and primary holder activity equals dormant 6MO+. The screen populates and populates and populates dozens of branches, hundreds of accounts, thousands of transactions, the same pattern, over and over. Small, consistent withdrawals from accounts belonging to the elderly or inactive, all initiated by secondary users, children, siblings, grandchildren, dipping into little accounts. It's a business model built on quiet, familial theft, all blessed by middle managers like Patrick, who just want their end-of-year reports to look clean. My secure email chimes. It's a new message. It's from Patrick Doyle, but it's not addressed to me. It's addressed to Michael Chen, the bank's general counsel. The subject line is our Garcia problem. My heart stops. He sent it to me by mistake. He typed Garcia Scarlett instead of Garcia Ridge Holdings in his address book, a Freudian slip of the highest order. I opened it. Michael, we need to get Garcia under control before she turns a minor family spat into some kind of ethical crusade. She's already filed a formal complaint, and I'm worried she's digging. Her profile says analyst, but she's asking questions way above her pay grade. We need to wall her off from this investigation. Find a way. Her own family is involved, so let's use that. Claim conflict of interest. We can't let this Maple Glen thing infect the Q4 numbers. I read the email once, then twice. He's not just dismissing me. He's actively trying to cover it up. He's trying to use my family, the people who stole from me, as a weapon to silence me. I look at the list of transactions on my other screen, the hundreds of other little accounts being drained. Patrick thinks this is a family spat. He thinks he's fighting with a mid-level analyst. He has no idea he just declared war on the person who signs his paychecks. I forward the email to Marcus Hale. My note is simple. Marcus, add Mr. Doyle to your investigation. It appears our violation is not confined to Ohio. The game just changed. They think I'm a pawn. They're about to find out I own the entire board. The rage I felt after reading Patrick's email was a cold, sharp, clarifying thing. It burned away the last vestiges of sentiment. Linda and Jason were no longer my mother and brother. They were liabilities. They were non-performing assets that had soured and were now threatening the entire portfolio. I stood up from my desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. 42 floors below. The Chicago River was a dark, sluggish ribbon. My family, in their greed, had become a risk case. Patrick, in his arrogance, had become a compliance failure. Emily was a compromised node. This was no longer a family drama. It was a systems analysis. I called Marcus back to my office. "Marcus," I said, not turning from the window, "I want to run a simulation." "A simulation, Ms. Garcia." "Patrick Doyle is actively suppressing this investigation. He is a compromised executive. That means we assume the entire risk management division he oversees is compromised. We cannot trust his chain of command. We are now operating on a parallel track." "Understood. I want you to create a new test case," I said. "Codename it Ledger. I want you to take the exact pattern from my Maple Glen account, the dormant primary user, the out-of-state address, the multiple small withdrawals followed by a large wire transfer, all initiated by a secondary user, redact my name and all identifying information. I want you to feed this pattern into the central audit system as a high-priority threat." "You want to see how many other accounts it flags," he said, catching on immediately. "I want to see how many accounts it flags. And more importantly, I want to see who in management has been overriding the alerts. Patrick's email proves he thinks this is a molehill. I want to show him the mountain he's been ignoring." "It will be resource-intensive," Marcus warned. "It will pull analysts from other projects." "This is the only project," I said. "Authorize whatever overtime you need." "And what about the original breach, your family?" "They are no longer a breach," I said. "They are evidence. We proceed against them by the book." He nodded once and left. My next call was to my personal attorney, Amelia Ross. Amelia doesn't work for Ironcrest. She works for me, Scarlett Garcia, the individual. She is a former federal prosecutor who specializes in high-stakes financial crime, and she charges $2,000 an hour. "Amelia," I said, when her crisp voice came on the line. "Scarlett, this is not our usual quarterly call. Trouble. A new file. 3 individuals, Linda Garcia, Jason Garcia, Emily Ward. I am sending you a secure packet from Marcus Hale with internal logs, transaction histories, and IP address traces. I want 2 sets of dossiers prepared, running on parallel tracks. Civil and criminal," she stated. It was not a question. "Exactly. On the civil side, I want suits drawn up for conversion, fraud, and unjust enrichment. I want liens prepared for every asset they hold: the house, the cars, their checking accounts. And on the criminal side, the packet includes evidence of unauthorized access to a financial institution's internal network, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, and wire fraud. I want a complete prosecutorial memo, ready to be handed to the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is aggressive. Scarlett, the names, Garcia, this is your family. They ceased to be my family when they used a compromised bank employee to access the system and look at the accounts of their elderly neighbors. Amelia, they are a ring of thieves. I want the paperwork drafted, vetted, and ready to be filed on my command. But do not file it. Not yet. I want the gun loaded and holstered. I will decide when, and if, to pull the trigger." "Understood. I'll need a retainer of $100,000 for the forensic team." "It's already in your account," I said, and hung up. My next step was more delicate. I opened the secure portal for Garcia Ridge Holdings. I navigated to the corporate bylaws. Article 4, Section 2, Paragraph B. In the event that a controlling shareholder possesses verifiable evidence of gross mismanagement or willful suppression of material risk by an executive officer, said shareholder may bypass the standard agenda protocols and call an emergency session of the Helios Bancorp Holdings Board. Helios Bancorp, the parent company, the one that owned Ironcrest, The board that Patrick Doyle ultimately answered to, though he had no idea I sat at the head of it. I drafted a simple, encrypted email to the secretary of the board. I attached the email from Patrick and a single-line summary of the Maple Glen breach. Place this on the emergency agenda. Do not activate until you receive a second verbal confirmation from me. The trap was set. Now, I just had to bait it. I walked back to Patrick's office. He was on the phone again. But I knocked and entered anyway, playing the part of the flustered, slightly intimidated analyst. "Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, keeping my voice just a little shaky. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the family spat." He muted his call, a look of mild irritation on his face. "Yes, Garcia. You're right. You're absolutely right. It's my mother. It's messy. I don't want to cause trouble for the bank. I've been emotional." His irritation softened into a condescending smile. He thought he'd won. "Good. That's smart thinking. Scarlett, a civil solution is always better in these things. You send them a nasty letter from a lawyer. They pay the money back. It all goes away. No need to air our dirty laundry. Right?" "Right," I said, lowering my eyes. "Thank you. Patrick, I appreciate you guiding me on this." "Happy to help," he said, muting his call, dismissing me. I walked back to my desk, my face a mask of subservience. I sat down. Then, I opened a separate, encrypted channel to the bank's internal ethics committee, a body that reported directly to the board, not to Patrick, to the ethics committee chair. Per internal whistleblower protocol 4A, I am flagging a potential systemic compliance failure within the risk management division, originating from the Maple Glen branch. I have evidence of suppressed risk alerts and potential executive malfeasance. I am requesting a full, independent audit, bypassing EVP Doyle's chain of command. I am filing this anonymously as Analyst 42. Please confirm the receipt. Patrick thought he had put out the fire. I had just lit a second one, right under his chair. That night, I did not go to the penthouse apartment I owned on the 82nd floor of another building, the one registered to an anonymous LLC. I drove my 10-year-old Honda back to the 620-square-foot studio I rented for my character. I sat on the lumpy second-hand sofa that I'd bought from a thrift store. I looked at the particle board bookshelf and the small, flickering television. I had built this stage to protect myself. I had surrounded myself with the trappings of mediocrity to see who would respect me for me, and not for what I had. I had my answer. I wondered, for a moment, if I had done it differently, if I had driven the Porsche home, if I had worn the designer suits, if I had lived in the penthouse, would they still have stolen from me? I laughed. A short, bitter sound in the small apartment. Of course they would have. They would have just demanded more. They would have seen my wealth not as a sign of my power, but as a deeper well from which they were entitled to drink. My poverty hadn't been a test. It had just been an insult to them. They didn't steal because I had so little. They stole because they felt I deserved so little. I opened my personal laptop. I created a new, encrypted spreadsheet. I titled it Thanksgiving Ledgers. I created columns: date, source, amount, action. Taken. I made the first entry. Date, 11/23/2000. Source, Linda Garcia. Amount, $18,512. Action file 1. A fraud initiated. I kept going, pulling the data from my memory and Marcus's files. Date 11/09/2025. Source Linda Jason Garcia. Amount $3,000. Action C file 1A. Date 10/15/2025. Source Linda Jason Garcia. Amount $5,000. I added a new section, Associated Risks. Risk Emily Ward. Breach shared credentials. Action file 1A. File 1B criminal. Risk Patrick Doyle. Breach suppression of material risk. Action Ethics Committee file 4A. Helios Board agenda pending. I looked at the cold, hard numbers. The anger was still there. a white-hot core, but it was now contained, channeled. I made a promise to myself then, a golden rule for this entire affair. I would not break a single law. I would not use my power to do anything illegal. My family and Patrick operated in the gray areas, in the land of favors and family, and let's not make waves. I would operate in the black and white of the legal code. I would use the system as it was designed. I would use the very rules they had broken to break them. If they were crushed, it would not be by my anger, it would be by the objective, impersonal, and relentless weight of the procedures they thought they were too clever to obey. My phone vibrated on the cheap coffee table. It was a secure text from Amelia. "Scarlett, this is interesting. I pulled the preliminary filings on Ironcrest to prep your civil suit. It seems the State Securities Commission is already sniffing around the bank. An unrelated matter. Something about improper reporting on commercial real estate loans from last year." I stared at the text. Patrick was already under scrutiny. He was trying to sweep my molehill under the rug because he knew the regulators were already standing in his office, looking for any sign of weakness. I replied to Amelia. "Find out who the lead investigator is at the SSC. We may have something that will help their case." Patrick's worst nightmare wasn't me, the angry analyst. It was me, the helpful whistleblower, handing the government a fresh, documented case of internal rot at the exact moment they were already looking for it. This wasn't a family spat. It was leverage, and I was about to apply all of it. It was 3 days later when the call I was expecting finally came. Not from my family, but from a number I didn't recognize with a Columbus area code. "Scarlett Garcia. Ms. Garcia, this is Detective Olivia Marquez with the State Financial Crimes Task Force. I'm calling regarding a formal report filed by Ironcrest Meridian Bank concerning suspicious activity at their Maple Glen branch. Your name is listed as one of the primary victims." Her voice was all business, no emotion, just facts. "Hello, Detective," I said, my own voice matching hers. "I'm aware of the report. I ask that this conversation be officially logged and recorded, per standard procedure." There was a half-second pause. She was probably used to victims being hysterical or confused, not citing procedure. "It already is. Ms. Garcia, we're on a recorded line. Can you confirm that you are the Scarlett Garcia associated with a savings account ending in 4490 at the Maple Glen branch? And can you confirm that you did not authorize a wire transfer in the amount of $18,512 on November 20th, or a series of smaller withdrawals totaling over $10,000 in the preceding 6 months? I did not authorize any of those transactions. They were fraudulent. The report states the primary suspect in the initial wire transfer is the joint account holder, Linda Garcia. Can you confirm your relationship to this individual?" "She is my mother," I said. The words felt like small, hard stones in my mouth. "I see." Another pause. This one was heavier. "Ms. Garcia, I'm going to be candid. The ledger report filed by your bank's internal security team flagged not just your account, but 12 others at that same branch, all showing a similar pattern of anomalous withdrawal by secondary users. The total amount we're looking at across all victims is significant. We're no longer treating this as a simple employee error. The Maple Glen branch is now the subject of a priority investigation for systemic elder fraud and familial account abuse. The Attorney General's office is being briefed. This was bigger than Marcus's initial findings. My ledger query had opened Pandora's box. "I understand. Detective, I will cooperate fully with your investigation. Please send any further inquiries through my legal counsel, Amelia Ross. I will have her office forward her contact information." "Understood. Ms. Garcia, you'll be hearing from us." She hung up. The Attorney General. The machine I had activated was bigger and faster than I had even anticipated. Meanwhile, in Maple Glen, the first consequences were landing. I knew this not because they called me, but because Marcus had monitoring alerts on my mother's accounts. The freeze had hit, her checking account, her savings, even the credit card she had linked to them all locked down. Pending investigation. The first call I received was not from my mother, but from an unknown Maple Glen number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was a man's voice, booming, overly confident, steeped in the false sincerity of a small-town big shot. Ms. Scarlett Garcia, this is Harold Pierce, of Pierce & Associates, attorneys at law. I am representing your mother, Linda Garcia, in a very serious matter concerning financial misconduct and abuse by Ironcrest Meridian Bank. Your mother is distraught. You have, by your actions, cut her off from her own money, left her and your father destitute, and caused severe emotional distress. I am calling to strongly advise you to cease and desist all action against your family immediately. Call me back, and we can resolve this before we are forced to take official and public action. Harold Pierce. I remembered him. He was a friend of my father's, a man who handled drunk driving cases and messy divorces, who put his face on placemats at the local diner. He was a bulldog with rubber teeth, and he had just outlined his entire pathetic strategy in a 2-minute voicemail. Destitute, emotional distress, public action. He was going to try and shame me. He thought this was a domestic dispute. He thought he could bully me by threatening to tell the neighbors. The next call was from my mother. I answered. It was not a request. It was an explosion. You, she shrieked, her voice cracking with a mix of tears and pure rage. You did this. You froze my accounts, my money. The grocery store just declined my card. Scarlett, in front of everyone, how could you do this to me? I didn't do anything. Mom, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. The bank's security system did. It detected fraud on your account, which, as you know, occurred. You stole $18,000. I did not steal, I borrowed it. And who are you to lock me out? I'm going to be homeless. Your father needs his medicine. You are abandoning your parents, starving us. Your mortgage is paid, and Dad is on Medicare. You are not starving, I said. This is the consequence of your actions. Consequence, she spat. Harold Pierce is going to sue you. Scarlett, he's going to sue you for everything you have. Abusing your little bank job to hurt your own mother for emotional damage. We are going to tell everyone. Everyone in Maple Glen is going to know what a cold, cruel, ungrateful daughter you are. They will know the truth. You will be ruined. The threats were so predictable, so childish. It was almost sad. She was threatening me with gossip. Mom, I said, and the coldness in my own voice surprised even me. I don't live in Maple Glen. The opinions of people I haven't seen in a decade do not concern me. You are a party to a criminal investigation for bank fraud. I suggest you stop threatening me and start listening to your lawyer, even if he is an idiot. I hung up the phone. I felt nothing. No guilt, no anger, just the quiet click of a door being locked. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place an hour later. An email from Amelia. Subject incoming Rocket Scarlett. It seems Mr. Pierce has been busy. He just served Ironcrest's legal department with a formal notice. It's creative. He's accusing the bank, and you by name, of conspiracy to inflict emotional distress. Breach of fiduciary duty. And this is the fun part. Malicious use of internal proprietary information to settle a personal vendetta. He's claiming you're a rogue employee using the bank's power to attack your family. This is exactly the kind of accusation that gives a corporate legal team a migraine. How do you want to play this? I stared at the email. Harold, in his small-town stupidity, had done something brilliant. He had handed Patrick Doyle the very weapon he had been looking for. I knew exactly what would happen next. I didn't have to wait long. An urgent calendar invite popped up from Patrick's assistant. Meeting Maple Glen file. In 5 minutes. I walked to his corner office. He was not smiling. He was standing by his window, his back to me. The letter from Harold Pierce on his desk. Patrick, I said, in my analyst voice. He turned, his face a mask of stern, corporate concern. Garcia, I've just been made aware of this legal threat from your family's attorney. It seems this situation is far more compromised than you led me to believe. It's a frivolous complaint. Patrick, a scare tactic from a small-town lawyer. That's not what I see, he said, tapping the letter. What I see is the name of one of my analysts, you at the center of a lawsuit, accusing this bank of malicious prosecution and abusing inside information. This is the exact kind of liability I was worried about. This is the molehill you promised to handle. I am handling it. No, he cut me off, holding up a hand. You're not. You're compromised. Your name is on the account. Your family is on the other side. And now you are named in a legal action against this bank. You, Scarlett, are a massive conflict of interest. You are too close to this. You are too emotional. He thought he was so clever. He was using my own words against me. Effective immediately, he said, his voice brimming with false authority. You are to recuse yourself from all matters related to the Maple Glen investigation. You will not contact internal security. You will not access the files. You will hand over all your work to date. Hand them over to who? I asked, playing my part. To me, he said. I will be personally managing the bank's response to this from now on. I am assigning Greg Foster to oversee the internal audit. We need a steady hand. Scarlett, not a conflicted one. We can't have you running your own little war out of our offices. Is that clear? Greg Foster, Patrick's right-hand man, the man who signed off on all his reports. He wasn't taking me off the case. He was burying the case. I looked at him. He believed, with all his arrogant heart, that he had just checkmated me. He had taken away my power, sidelined me, and seized control of the one investigation that could expose him. I let a small flicker of defeat show on my face. Yes, Patrick, I said quietly. That's perfectly clear. I walked out of his office, and I could feel his smug smile on my back. I returned to my desk. I sat down. Patrick thought he had taken control. What he had actually done was confirm. In a way, I could now prove that he was actively interfering in a federal investigation. He had personally taken charge of the cover-up. I picked up my phone. I accessed the secure portal for Garcia Ridge Holdings. I found the emergency agenda item I had prepared. I sent the single, one-word text message to the secretary of the Helios Bancorp board. Activate. Patrick's emergency was about to begin. I feigned my defeat, walked back to my desk, and for the rest of the day, I was the perfect, chastened employee. I forwarded the Maple Glen file, the neutered, incomplete version, to Patrick's sycophant, Greg Foster. I did my routine work. I left the office at 5:30, just like everyone else. I got into my 10-year-old Honda, its engine rattling in the cold underground garage. I pulled into traffic, just another anonymous analyst heading home to her tiny apartment. I did not drive to the penthouse. I did not call Amelia. I made my simple dinner and watched the local news. I was performing my role flawlessly, and I knew, back in Maple Glen, they were performing theirs. I could picture the scene. My mother, emboldened, Jason, triumphant, and Harold Pierce, puffing his chest, telling them how he'd put the fear of God into that big city bank. I was certain they were planning their next move. They wouldn't be satisfied with a legal letter. Harold had tasted blood. He would convince them to come to Chicago, to confront the rogue employee in person. He would imagine a scene where they made my bosses see the truth, where I would be fired and shamed. They would be driving right into the heart of my territory, armed with nothing but their own arrogance, completely oblivious to the fact that I had just activated the kill switch. The emergency board meeting for Helios Bancorp Holdings was scheduled for the next morning. The Helios boardroom is on the 50th floor, 5 floors above the Ironcrest Executive Suites. It is a place of old money and absolute power. The table is a single, 30-foot slab of black marble that feels cold to the touch even in summer. The chairs are dark leather, and the panoramic windows overlook Millennium Park and the lake. Patrick Doyle was already at the table, sipping coffee from a delicate porcelain cup. He was there to present his rosy fourth-quarter risk projections. He looked relaxed, confident, and very much in charge. When I walked in, he saw me. His eyes narrowed in confusion, then flickered with undisguised annoyance. He thought I was a staffer, or perhaps an analyst who had wandered into the wrong room. He opened his mouth, probably to tell me to get out, when the chairman of the board, Harold Knox, stood up. Knox was a man in his 70s, with a shock of white hair and a reputation for corporate brutality. He did not get where he was by suffering fools. "Good morning, gentlemen," Knox said, his voice gravelly. "We have one emergency item on the agenda this morning, which will take precedence. It has been brought to our attention by the majority shareholder of this corporation." Patrick stiffened. The other board members, all men in dark, expensive suits, looked around, confused. "I believe you all know Patrick Doyle, our EVP of Risk." Knox continued. "Patrick, I don't believe you've been formally introduced to the principal representative for Garcia Ridge Holdings." Patrick looked blank. Garcia Ridge Holdings meant nothing to him. It was just one of the anonymous LLCs and funds on the cap table. "Ms. Scarlett Garcia," Knox said, gesturing to me. I watched the color drain from Patrick Doyle's face. It was a beautiful, terrible thing to see. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The blood fled his cheeks, leaving a gray, waxy pallor. He was connecting the dots, the name Garcia echoing in his head, the mid-level analyst he had dismissed, the conflict of interest he had just sidelined. He was staring at the woman who controlled 61% of the company. He was staring at his boss. "Ms. Garcia," Knox said, turning the floor over to me. I did not sit. I stood at the head of the table. I did not look at Patrick. I looked at the other board members. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, my voice crisp and cold, echoing slightly off the glass. "I am here because Garcia Ridge has identified a systemic rot within Ironcrest Bank, one that EVP Doyle has been actively concealing for the sake of his quarterly reports." "Now see here," Patrick blustered, finding his voice. "That is an outrageous accusation." "Is it?" I said, cutting him off. I nodded to the AV tech, and Patrick's missent email to Michael Chen appeared on the 80-inch screen behind me. "We need to get Garcia under control. We can't let this Maple Glen thing infect the Q4 numbers." The room was silent. Patrick looked at the email, then at me, and his eyes were no longer just panicked. They were filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. "This is a case study," I said, "of a management-condoned culture of fraud. It begins in our community branches. In places like Maple Glen, Ohio, tellers are being encouraged by management to bypass security protocols for what they call family access. They are letting relatives drain the accounts of other family members, often elderly and inactive clients, without verification, all to boost customer engagement metrics." I clicked to the next slide. It showed the data from Marcus's ledger query. "This is not an isolated incident," I said. "This is a pattern, one that exposes this bank to billions in regulatory fines, class action lawsuits, and catastrophic reputational damage. The State Securities Commission, I should remind you, is already looking into our commercial loan reporting. This kind of systemic, documented failure of compliance is not a molehill, Patrick. It's a gift-wrapped indictment for the Attorney General." I let that hang in the air. The board members were no longer looking at Patrick with annoyance. They were looking at him with the cold fury of men who saw their stock price threatened. "Mr. Doyle," I continued, "fostered and protected this culture. When this specific case was brought to his attention, he did not investigate, he did not escalate, he suppressed it. He personally intervened to take the investigation away from internal security and hand it to his own subordinate, citing a conflict of interest as a pretext to bury it." I finally turned and looked directly at him. The conflict of interest he cited was the fact that the victim account was mine. The last piece clicked into place. The board understood. This was not a theoretical risk. This was the controlling shareholder, sitting at their table, telling them she had been personally robbed by a system that one of their executives had protected. Harold Knox did not waste time. "Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Patrick, you are excused." "Harold, you can't be serious," Patrick sputtered. "This is a personal vendetta. She's using her position." "You are excused," Knox repeated, his voice like granite. "Your access to the Ironcrest network will be suspended, pending a full, independent investigation. You will not contact any employee. You will not set foot in this building. You are on administrative leave, effective immediately." Patrick stared at me, his face a mask of rage. He stood, straightened his expensive tie, and walked out of the room, a dead man walking. As the door clicked shut, Knox turned to me. "A new independent oversight committee will be formed, reporting directly to this board. We assume you will want a seat." "I will chair it," I said, by noon. The first memo from the new committee went out to every single Ironcrest employee, bank-wide. It was drafted by Amelia and approved by the board's general counsel. Subject mandatory update. Family access and account security protocols. Effective immediately. Any and all transactions involving secondary access to a joint account where the primary holder is inactive, out of state, or over the age of 75 are suspended without exception. Reactivation requires the primary account holder to appear in person, with 2 forms of identification, for a notarized and video-recorded consent filing. Any employee found bypassing these protocols for any reason, including customer engagement, will be subject to immediate termination and criminal referral to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The system was reset. The loophole was closed. That afternoon, I held the first meeting of the new committee. It was just me, Marcus Hale, and 2 stone-faced lawyers from the board. "Run the ledger query again," I said. "This time, with full board-level authority. I want every branch, every transaction, every override," Marcus typed. The system whirred. We waited. The results began to populate. Maple Glen was there, and then another branch, Lima, Ohio, and another, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and another, Muncie, and a 5th, Danville, Illinois. The same pattern, the same family access, the same metric-driven theft. "My God," one of the lawyers whispered, looking at the screen. "This is a contagion." "It's not a contagion," I said, my voice cold. "It's a business model." I looked at Marcus. "Pull the regional management charts for all 5 branches." He did. The names on the screen meant nothing to the lawyers, but they meant everything to me. All 5 branches, including Maple Glen, rolled up to the same regional vice president. "And who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Does that RVP report to?" Marcus pulled up the final chart. The line of authority was direct, clean, and damning. "EVP Patrick Doyle," Marcus said. "It all runs directly to his office." The rot wasn't at the branch level. It wasn't even at the regional level. It was coming from the very top. Patrick wasn't just ignoring a problem. He was presiding over a shadow empire built on the theft of little accounts, and I had just taken away his keys. I knew they were coming. Harold Pierce, in his infinite small-town wisdom, would have insisted on it, a face-to-face confrontation, a show of force. He would tell them that his letter had the Chicago bank terrified, and now it was time to deliver the knockout blow. They must have stood on the pavement on Wacker Drive, staring up at the Ironcrest Tower, 50 stories of glass and steel. My mother, Linda, would have been intimidated. Jason and his wife, Kelsey, would have masked their awe with scorn. I can hear Harold's pep talk, his voice booming with false confidence. "Now listen, don't be fooled by all this glass. The bigger the company, the more they fear a scandal. A mother and son, abandoned by a cruel, wealthy daughter. A daughter who works for the bank and is using her power to freeze their assets. Oh, they will pay. They will pay dearly just to make us go away." They marched into the lobby, a cathedral of marble that was designed to make people feel small. Harold, puffing out his chest, approached the main security desk. "We are here to see Scarlett Garcia," he would have announced. "And her supervisor. We have a meeting." The receptionist, a consummate professional, would have checked her console. "Ah, yes, the party for Ms. Garcia. She has the 41st floor conference room reserved for you." Harold would have paused at that. "Ms. Garcia, not Scarlett, not our analyst. She is currently in a company-wide town hall," the receptionist would have continued. But she asked that you be made comfortable. An escort will take you up." They were not led to a cubicle farm on a noisy floor. They were led to an express elevator. They stepped out into a silent, carpeted reception area with original art on the walls. They were shown into a glass-walled conference room with a view of the entire city. A silver tray with coffee and pastries was waiting for them. This was not the office of a struggling mid-level employee. Harold, I'm sure, recovered quickly. "You see," he'd whisper, "they're terrified. This is how they treat people they're about to write a very large check to. They're rolling out the red carpet." They settled in, Linda, Jason, and Kelsey, my jury of thieves, preparing their lines of righteous indignation. Harold would be laying out his files, rehearsing his threats. He would demand a settlement. He would demand my termination. He would threaten to go to the press, to paint me as the ungrateful daughter, the corporate viper who turned on her own family. "Ms. Garcia will be with you shortly," the escort said. "Her town hall is being broadcast on the internal network. The monitor is here, if you'd like to watch." The screen was already on. While they were sipping coffee and planning my demise, I was on a stage in the third-floor auditorium. The event was billed as an emergency policy and shareholder address. It was standing room only, broadcast to every branch in the Ironcrest network. The air was electric with rumors. Patrick Doyle's sudden, unexplained administrative leave had fueled 1,000 theories. Patrick himself was there. The board had insisted he attend. He sat in the front row, his face a pale, strained mask. He looked like a man who knew he was at his own execution, but hadn't yet seen the axe. I stood at the podium. I wore my simple, charcoal suit. I looked out over the hundreds of faces, and at the camera lens that I knew was pointed right at my family, 40 floors above. "Good morning," I began. My voice was amplified, filling the room, calm and cold. "We are here to address a critical vulnerability, a systemic failure of compliance that, for too long, has been disguised as good customer service. I am talking about the accepted and even encouraged practice of family access fraud." A ripple of shock went through the room. "I want to share a case study," I continued. "A female client of this bank, a family member, believing the client had spare change in a little account, decided to help themselves. They colluded with an employee at a local branch, another relative, to bypass every security protocol and wire out $18,000 to remodel a kitchen." The auditorium was dead silent. I could feel Patrick's stare. When this fraud was detected by the system, it was manually overridden. When the employee was questioned, her defense was that management encouraged flexibility to boost engagement metrics. And when the victim escalated the fraud to executive management, she was told to be quiet. She was told it was a family spat and a molehill that shouldn't infect the quarterly reports. I paused. That executive management is no longer in a position to suppress this threat. A collective gasp. Patrick Doyle looked like he had been struck. "This was not a molehill," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "It was the tip of an iceberg. An independent audit found this pattern repeated across 5 states, a business model targeting the elderly and the absent, all to satisfy internal metrics. This culture of corruption ends today." I detailed the new zero-tolerance policies, the video-recorded consent, the immediate termination and criminal referral for any employee who bypassed them. Then, I stepped back. Harold Knox, the chairman of the board, walked to the podium. "Thank you," he said. "The board is indebted to the employee who brought this critical failure to our attention. These new policies are mandatory and immediate. The full board has required them, acting on an emergency directive from the principal stakeholder of Helios Bancorp Holdings." The room buzzed. Everyone knew Helios was owned by anonymous funds, in the front row. Patrick's guts tightened. I could see it. He didn't know who the anonymous shareholder was. He was looking at the other board members, a desperate, hunted look in his eyes. "This stakeholder," Knox continued, "has, until now, preferred to operate as a silent partner, but in light of these events, they have decided to take a public and direct role in oversight." Knox looked to the side. It is my privilege to introduce to you all the principal owner and representative of Garcia Ridge Holdings. I stepped forward from the shadows of the stage. I walked to a small table where the new corporate charter amendments were waiting. I picked up a pen and signed them. Knox gestured to me, his voice booming. "Ms. Scarlett Garcia." The silence in that room was absolute. It was a heavy, crushing weight, hundreds of people, all staring, their minds frantically trying to connect the dots. The mid-level analyst, the victim in the case study, the chair of the new independent committee, the 61% controlling shareholder. Patrick Doyle looked like he had turned to stone. His face, already pale, was now a waxy, bloodless gray. He was staring at me, his mouth open. He didn't just lose his job. He realized, in that one horrifying moment, that the person he'd dismissed as a molehill had surgically dismantled him. And upstairs, on the 41st floor, my family was watching the same feed. They were watching the monitor as the camera zoomed in on my face. They heard Harold Knox say, "Principal owner." They heard him say, "Controlling stakeholder." They heard him say my name, Linda, Jason, Kelsey, Harold Pierce. Their entire strategy was built on the assumption that I was small, that I was a weak link, a disgruntled employee they could pressure and shame. They had just learned that the little account they'd emptied, the $18,000 they thought was my spare change, was less than a rounding error. It wasn't a savings account. It was a tripwire. I left the stage. I did not take questions. I walked past Patrick Doyle, not even glancing at him. I took the private elevator to the 41st floor. I walked down the quiet, carpeted hall to the conference room. Through the glass, I could see them. They were frozen. Jason was white, staring at the polished table. Kelsey was visibly shaking. Linda was as still as a statue, her face a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. Harold Pierce was the only one moving. He was frantically, clumsily, trying to stuff his legal papers back into his briefcase, his hands trembling. I pushed the heavy glass door open. The whoosh of air was the only sound. They all looked up. I stopped just inside the room. I looked at my mother, my brother, his wife, and finally, at the terrified, sweating, third-rate lawyer who had threatened to ruin me. I let the silence stretch, filling the room until it was hard to breathe. Then, I smiled. "Welcome to my bank," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I believe you are here to threaten me with a lawsuit. Now, shall we discuss exactly who is suing whom?" The heavy glass door clicked shut behind me, sealing us in. The silence in the room was brittle. Harold Pierce, who had been shoving papers into his briefcase, froze. Linda, Jason, and Kelsey just stared, their faces a spectrum of shock and disbelief. Kelsey was the first to make a sound, a small, choked sob. Harold, to his credit, was a creature of habit. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals attacked. He zipped his briefcase, slammed it shut on the table, and tried to reclaim the narrative. "Now just 1 minute," he boomed, his voice trembling only slightly. "This is a circus. A theatrical, inappropriate abuse of corporate power. Ms. Garcia, your position here changes nothing. In fact, it makes it worse. You've used your bank to terrorize your own family." "Terrorize?" I asked, walking slowly toward the table. I remained standing. "Is that what you call freezing a compromised account after a fraudulent $18,000 transfer?" "It was a misunderstanding," Harold shouted. My mother, Linda, seeing her cue, burst into the performance I had been waiting for my entire life. "He's right," she wailed, genuine panic finally breaking through her manufactured outrage. "Scarlett, honey, it was just a mistake. We didn't know. How could we know all this?" She gestured wildly at the room, the city, the invisible empire. "We thought you were you." Just our Scarlett, Jason, seeing an opening, jumped in, his voice thick with a new kind of grievance. "You've been lying to us, Scar, for years. This whole act," he pointed at my simple suit. "The tiny apartment, the crap car. You were playing us, making us think you were struggling. while you were sitting on this, mom and dad sacrificed everything for us. They gave you everything, and you repay them by trying to put her in jail over some money you didn't even need. It was a beautiful attempt. The guilt trip, the pivot. I was the liar. I was the cruel one. I let their words hang in the air, echoing off the glass. Then, I placed a single, 1-inch thick binder on the polished black marble table. I pushed it slowly toward Harold. "Misunderstanding," I repeated. I tapped the cover. "Open it." He hesitated. He looked at Linda, then at me. He unzipped his briefcase again, pulled out a pair of reading glasses, and opened the binder. His face went from indignant to ashen in about 3 seconds. "That," I said, my voice quiet but filling the room, "is not a misunderstanding. That is a timeline." I pointed to the first tab. Page 1 is the wire transfer for $18,512, approved by Emily Ward, time-stamped. Page 2 is the log, showing Emily bypassed 3 security flags. Page 3 is the log, showing she used her manager's credentials to do it. I tapped the second tab. This section is the itemized list of every other withdrawal for the last 6 months, 3,000, the 5,000, the steady drip, totaling another $10,400. I tapped the third tab. This is the fun part. This is the log of every time Jason's home IP address accessed the bank's internal portal using Emily Ward's stolen credentials. And this is the list of the other 3 elderly clients whose accounts he viewed while he was there. I'm sure Detective Marquez will be very interested in that. Jason made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. "And this," I said, tapping the final, thinnest tab, "is a copy of the notes you, Harold, prepared for my mother and brother, the talking points. I especially liked the part where you advised them to use the word borrow repeatedly, and to emphasize that they believed they had consent. It's a nice attempt to preemptively mitigate the intent to defraud charge." Harold slammed the binder shut. "This is privileged communication. You have no right." "It's not privileged when it's evidence in a criminal conspiracy," I said, not missing a beat. "Which brings us to the present. You have 2 paths. I have had my personal attorneys draw up the paperwork for both. You will choose one before you leave this room." I placed 2 stacks of paper on the table. "Path A," I said, tapping the thicker stack. "I walk out of this room, and this entire binder, along with the criminal referrals prepared by my lawyer, is hand-delivered to the U.S. Attorney's Office. You, Linda, Jason, and Emily will be indicted for bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and unauthorized access to a protected computer system. You will all, very likely, go to prison." Linda let out a thin, high-pitched wail. "Path B," I said, tapping the other stack, "is the civil settlement. You will sign this today. It states, in no uncertain terms, that you will repay every single cent you stole, all $28,912 plus 22% interest, which is the default penalty rate for this class of fraud. You will sign a full, binding confession, admitting that you stole the money, not borrowed, and you will sign a permanent restraining order, legally barring you from ever contacting me, my employees, or any of my holdings again, by any means, except through your attorney." Harold stared at the civil agreement. He saw the loophole. He saw a way out that didn't involve an orange jumpsuit. He was a bad lawyer, but he wasn't stupid. He grabbed the pen. "Wait," Jason said, his voice raw. He looked at Harold, then at me. A new, desperate cunning was in his eyes. He had nothing left to lose. "Wait, she can't do this." Harold looked up, confused. "She can't," Jason repeated, standing up. "She's the owner, he said it. She's controlling whatever. She can't use her own bank to do this. It's a conflict of interest. Right, Harold?" Harold's eyes lit up. He snatched his hand back from the pen. He was back. "He's right. He's absolutely right. Ms. Garcia, you have a serious problem. You are the controlling shareholder, but you are also the victim. You have used the bank's internal security team, your employees, to build a case against your own family. You sat in a town hall and used your personal grievance as a case study to get an executive fired. The press will love this. Jason piled on, his confidence surging. We'll go to the media. We'll go to every social media site. Cold-blooded CEO, worth hundreds of millions, uses her corporate army to jail her own mother over $18,000. You think your board will like that? Scarlett, you think your stockholders will like that? You'll be ruined. You'll be a pariah. They were smiling. Linda was smiling through her tears. They thought they had me. They thought they had finally found a piece of leverage. I just stared at them. I let them have their moment. I let them enjoy the fantasy that they were, in any way, in control. You're right, Harold, I said softly. It is a conflict of interest, and you, of all people, should know how dangerous it is to interfere in a bank's internal investigation. Harold's smile twitched. What are you talking about? I reached into my suit pocket. I pulled out a small, black USB drive and a single sheet of paper. I slid them across the table. You should really be more careful about who you talk to on the phone, I said. Especially when you're talking to a man who is already under internal surveillance. This is the full transcript and the original audio of your call 2 days ago to Patrick Doyle. Harold's bloodless face was a mirror of Patrick's in the boardroom. Let me refresh your memory, I said. You called him, you introduced yourself as the family's lawyer, and you offered him a deal. You said, and I quote, "We can make this entire Maple Glen problem go away for you. We'll say it was a misunderstanding. All you have to do is get your analyst, Garcia, to back off. You, Mr. Pierce, attempted to collude with a bank executive to suppress a federal investigation." I leaned in. You call the media. You breathe one word of conflict of interest, and I will personally hand this USB drive to the State Securities Commission and the Attorney General's office, and that conflict of interest story. It gets replaced by a much, much better one. Small-town lawyer and bank EVP conspire to hide systemic elder fraud from federal investigators. At that point, Harold, it's not just my family going to prison, it's you, and it's Patrick Doyle. I pushed the civil agreement and the pen back toward him. Your move. No one spoke. The only sound was Harold's ragged breathing. Linda was staring at me, her eyes wide with a new, profound terror. She had finally realized she hadn't just misjudged my wealth. She had misjudged me. She had spent 32 years thinking I was a pawn, and had just discovered I was the one playing the game. She wasn't just outmatched. She was irrelevant. The moment was perfect. The checkmate is absolute. And then, my phone rang. The ringtone was discreet, but in the silence, it sounded like a fire alarm. I looked at the screen. Detective Olivia Marquez. I held up a hand to my family. A silent, stay, and answered the call, putting it on speaker. Detective Marquez, you've reached Scarlett Garcia. Ms. Garcia. Her voice was steel. I'm not calling about your case. I'm calling about the other cases. The ones your ledger query uncovered. Go on, I said. My eyes locked on Jason. My team has spent the last 48 hours interviewing the other victims your team flagged at the Maple Glen branch. Mrs. Gable, 84 years old, account drained by her nephew. Mr. Henderson, 78, account drained by his son. It's a cesspool. The local DA has already convened a grand jury. This is no longer a collection of individual fraud cases. Ms. Garcia, this is a criminal enterprise. We are treating the Maple Glen branch as a RICO case. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, a federal charge used to take down the mob. The Attorney General, Marquez continued, is unsealing the indictment tomorrow morning. This isn't about your $18,000 anymore. This is about systemic, organized crime, and I just got a warrant, not for your mother, for your brother. Jason stopped breathing. His IP logs from inside the bank's portal, Marquez said. They're the linchpin. They prove it wasn't just family borrowing, it was a conspiracy, A warrant for the arrest of Jason Garcia is being executed as we speak. I'm calling you as a courtesy. Your personal civil matter is about to be superseded by a multi-count federal indictment. I looked at Jason. His face was slick with sweat. He knew. Thank you, Detective, I said. I appreciate the update. I hung up the phone. I looked at my brother. It seems, I said, that Path B is no longer an option for you. The machine I had set in motion was no longer just mine. It now belonged to the state. Detective Marquez's RICO charge was not an exaggeration. Her team, armed with the bank's internal data, descended on Maple Glen. They didn't just talk to my family. They talked to everyone. They interviewed Mrs. Gable, 84 years old, who tearfully admitted her nephew had been helping her with her bills for a year, and now her savings account, the one she kept for her own funeral, was empty. They spoke to Mr. Henderson, 78, and in poor health, whose son had borrowed his Social Security checks for 6 months straight, assuring him the bank said it was all perfectly normal. The stories were identical. A trusted family member, an elderly, vulnerable victim, and a bank that looked the other way, all under the guise of community banking. The weakest link, of course, was Emily. I saw the transcript of her interrogation, provided by Marcus to the Oversight Committee. She was in a small, gray room at the local police station. For the first 2 hours, she was defiant. She blamed Linda. She blamed Jason. She blamed me for being secretly rich and setting a trap. Then, Detective Marquez showed her the IP logs from Jason's computer, showed her the evidence of him accessing other clients' accounts, showed her the sentencing guidelines for federal bank fraud. Emily collapsed. The transcript was damning. I didn't know he was doing that, she sobbed. I thought it was just family. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, told us. He said Mr. Doyle in Chicago wanted our client engagement numbers to go up. He said the fastest way was to leverage family assets. He said, stop being a robot and start being a problem solver. He told us to be flexible with the rules. I was just doing what I was told. She had just handed the Attorney General's office the entire chain of command, from the local branch all the way to Patrick Doyle. The next day, a formal subpoena from the state attorney general landed on the desk of Harold Knox. It was not a request. It was a demand. They wanted every audit log, every email, and every personnel file associated with Maple Glen, Lima, Fort Wayne, Muncie, and Danville. The state was now officially investigating Ironcrest Bank for facilitating a criminal enterprise. The emergency board meeting was brief. The independent committee chaired by me presented its findings. Emily's testimony was the final nail in the coffin. The vote was unanimous. Patrick Doyle was not just suspended, he was terminated. For cause, effective immediately. His stock options voided. I thought that would be the end of him. I was wrong. That evening, my private line rang, a number I didn't recognize. Garcia. Scarlet Ms. Garcia, please. It was Patrick. His voice was unrecognizable. The arrogance, the condescending baritone, it was gone. He sounded small, thin, and terrified. You've won. All right, he said, his words tumbling out. I'm finished. They've taken everything. My career, my pension. It's over. This call is inappropriate. Patrick, I said, preparing to hang up. Wait, please, he begged. This AG investigation, you have to stop it. This isn't about me anymore. This is about the bank, your bank. If this goes public, a RICO charge will gut the stock. It will destroy shareholder value. It will ruin everything. You have to contain this. Tell them it was me. Tell them it was a rogue executive and it stops with me. I said nothing. He was sweating. I could hear it. I can help you, he stammered. Your family, that local DA in Maple Glen. He's a friend of a friend. I can make a call. I can make sure your mother that this all just goes away for her. A fine? Probation. I can get her out of it. I can trade my influence for her freedom. Just call off the AG. Tell them it was contained. I let the silence stretch. He was offering to trade my mother's freedom for my silence. He still thought this was a negotiation. He still thought he had something to sell. "Patrick," I said, my voice ice cold, "you built your entire career on the principle that the victims don't matter. That the molehills, the elderly, the vulnerable, that their losses were just the cost of business. You and men like you are the rot in the system. You're not worried about shareholder value. You're worried that conspiracy to commit bank fraud will be added to your list of failures. You are absolutely right. I am done talking to you. But my offer—" "You have no offer," I said. "You have no influence. You have no power. You are just another man who got caught. You will face the consequences of the system you thought you were above." I hung up. The system continued to grind. Harold Knox, the board chairman, true to his word, cleaned the house. The branch manager in Maple Glen was fired. The 4 other branch managers were fired. The regional vice president who reported to Patrick was fired. The bank issued a formal public apology without naming me and created a multi-million-dollar restitution fund for all victims identified in the ledger audit. But the criminal case proceeded. In Maple Glen, the house of cards my family lived in was collapsing. Linda Garcia received a formal subpoena to testify before the grand jury. Harold Pierce, who had suddenly become a much meeker and less expensive lawyer, informed her of what that meant. She was no longer a witness, she was a target. He told her, in no uncertain terms, that her civil misunderstanding was now a criminal conspiracy. He told her that, given the evidence, she was facing a potential indictment, and for the first time, he used the words, "actual prison." The war at home, I learned later, was catastrophic. My mother, confronted with a consequence she couldn't cry or scream her way out of, turned on the only person left, Jason. It was his idea. He pushed her. He handled the computer. He was the greedy one. It was all his fault. Jason, in turn, blamed her. She was the one with her name on the account. She was the one who wanted the quartz countertops. Kelsey, seeing the ship sinking, took the lifeboat. She packed a bag, took their one car, and went to stay with her mother. And then, for the first time in his life, my brother was well and truly alone. He came to Chicago. He didn't call. He didn't try to get past the main security. He just stood on the street in front of the Ironcrest Tower, in the rain, staring up. O'Malley, the lobby guard, recognized him from a security alert and called my office. "Ms. Garcia, your brother is here. On the pavement. He doesn't look good, ma'am." "I'll come down," I said. I met him in the lobby. He was soaked. He looked thin, pale, and broken. The smug, confident brother from Thanksgiving was gone, replaced by a terrified, angry man-child. "They're going to indict her," he whispered, as people in suits walked around us. They handed her a piece of paper. "Scar. A subpoena. She won't stop crying. She is a target of a federal investigation. Jason, that seems like an appropriate response." "Don't," he snapped, his voice cracking. "Don't be so cold. This is Mom, our mother. She was your mother when she conspired with you to steal my money, too." He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. "It was $18,000, and you have all of this?" He gestured wildly at the marble lobby, the high ceilings, the entire, massive building. "You have everything, we have nothing, and now you're just going to let them send Mom to prison over a kitchen." "She wasn't indicted for a kitchen, Jason. She was indicted for conspiracy. You were indicted for bank fraud. You're the one who logged into the portal. You're the one who looked at Mrs. Gable's account. This is on you." "I know," he shouted, and for the first time, I saw real tears in his eyes. Not my mother's manipulative tears, but hot, desperate, terrified tears. "I know. Okay, I know I screwed up. I'm going to jail. I know that. But her mom—" He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Scarlett, please. I just have to ask, is there a way? Is there any possible way that Mom doesn't go to jail, but you still feel like you got enough revenge?" The word hung in the air between us. Revenge. He hadn't called it a misunderstanding. He hadn't called it borrowing. He hadn't called it family. He had finally said the true word. He had admitted what this was. As I stared at him, my brother, the hollow man who had finally told the truth. My phone rang. The name on the screen was Detective Olivia Marquez. I looked at Jason's hand on my arm. I looked at his desperate, rain-soaked face. I answered the call, and I put it on speaker. "Detective, you've reached Scarlett Garcia. Ms. Garcia." Her voice was crisp, professional. "I'm calling from the Attorney General's office. We're finalizing the plea agreements." Jason's breath hitched. He stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a snake. "The case against your brother, Jason Garcia, is ironclad," Marquez said. "His IP logs, the testimony from Emily Ward. He's facing a mandatory minimum of 5 years. We are not offering him a deal. He is the primary conspirator." Jason swayed, but I held him steady with my gaze. "Patrick Doyle is also being indicted," she continued. "Racketeering, conspiracy, systemic fraud. He's looking at 10, but the other 2 are your mother and your cousin. They're accessories. They're small fish. The AG is practical. He wants to clear the docket." "What are you offering?" I asked. "For Linda Garcia and Emily Ward, we're prepared to offer a plea. They plead guilty to a lesser charge, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, full restitution of all funds, 500 hours of community service, and 5 years probation, no jail time." Jason's face, which had been a mask of terror, suddenly flooded with a desperate, agonizing hope. He looked at me, his eyes begging. "It's a good deal," Marquez said. "But there is one condition. The AG's office will only offer this deal if you, as the primary victim and the one whose testimony is central to the entire case, sign off on it. You are the one the jury will listen to. If you go on that stand and demand the maximum sentence for your mother, you will get it. If you agree to show mercy, the state will grant it." She paused. I could hear the hum of the government office on the other end of the line. "So, Ms. Garcia," Marquez said, her voice dropping, "the choice is yours. The AG wants to know, do we bury them or do we let them go?" I sat in my real office, the one on the 49th floor, not the analyst cubicle on the 35th, through the glass wall. The city of Chicago spread out below me, a grid of lights against the dark winter afternoon. The call with Detective Marquez had ended hours ago, but the choice she presented still hung in the air. Amelia Ross sat opposite me, on the black marble of my desk. She had placed 2 documents, side by side. "This," she said, tapping the document on the left, "is the plea deal from the Attorney General. Full restitution, 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, no jail time for Linda Garcia or Emily Ward. Your brother, Jason, is not included. He's facing the mandatory minimum. This deal is contingent on your signature." "And the other one?" I asked, though I knew what it was. "This," she tapped the document on the right, "is your victim impact statement. It's a blank page. Scarlett, you can write whatever you want. If you ask the judge for the maximum sentence, citing the systemic abuse, the breach of trust, and the conspiracy, he will almost certainly give it to you. Your mother would serve 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years. I tried to picture it. My mother, Linda, in a beige jumpsuit, in a concrete room. The daughter in me, the 19-year-old girl crying in her dorm room, the 32-year-old woman who'd had her trust betrayed at every turn. That part of me wanted it. It wanted her to feel, for the first time in her life, a real, irreversible consequence, a consequence she couldn't lie, bargain, or cry her way out of. I wanted her to understand the loss of freedom, but the CEO in me, the woman who ran a $30 billion bank, looked at it differently. The prison system was just another broken system, one I didn't control. And what would it accomplish? Would it give me back the money? Oh, would it heal the 19-year-old? No. Justice and revenge are 2 different things, and sometimes revenge is just a hollow, angry echo. I need to see them, I said. One last time. Amelia arranged it. A conference room at her law firm. Not my bank, not my territory. Neutral ground. They came in looking smaller, diminished. Jason was in a cheap suit, his face gray. He was out on bail, and the reality of his future was clearly crushing him. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the table. Linda, however, was still trying to play the game. She had been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, but as she sat down, she tried to muster one last performance of aggrieved motherhood. "Scarlett," she began, her voice trembling. "You can't do this. I'm your mother. I only took that money because I knew you didn't need it. I took it because I raised you. I gave you everything. You owe me." Jason flinched. A violent, full-body wince. "Mom, just stop," he whispered, not looking up. I held up a hand. "No," I said, my voice quiet, cutting through her planned speech. "Let her finish, but I want to correct your language." Linda stared at me, confused. "You didn't take the money," I said. "You stole it. Say the word." "I what?" she stammered. "Scarlett, that's not... It was a misunderstanding." "Say it," I said. My voice didn't rise. "You are in this room because you conspired to commit fraud. The only reason you have a choice between probation and prison is because I am offering it to you. Now, I want to hear you say the true word. You didn't borrow. You didn't take. You stole it. Say it, Linda." I stared at her. I didn't blink. The CEO was gone. The daughter was gone. This was something else. This was the auditor, demanding the ledger be balanced. She looked at Jason. He wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at her lawyer, who just shook his head slightly, telling her to do it. Her face crumpled. The performance dissolved, leaving behind a bitter, defeated old woman. "I stole," she whispered, the words choking her. "I stole the money. And you, Jason," I said, turning to him, "you stole it, too, and you broke into my bank system to hunt for more." He just nodded. His shoulders slumped. "Yes," he whispered. "I did. It was done. The admission. The final, broken, pathetic truth. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't a victory. It just was." I turned to Amelia. "We're signing the plea." I signed the state's agreement, and then I slid across a third document, one I had drafted. "This is my civil addendum," I said. "You will sign this, or the plea deal is off the table, and I will ask for the maximum sentence, both of you." Harold, their lawyer, read it, his eyes widening. "1," I said, counting off the points. "You will pay back the full amount, $28,912, plus the 22% penalty interest. I don't care how." 2, I continued. "Your 500 hours of community service will not be spent picking up trash. You will both volunteer for a financial literacy program for the elderly. You will spend 500 hours teaching other people how to not get robbed by their families." Jason looked up, his face pale. "And 3, I said, my voice dropping. "A permanent, lifetime, legally binding no-contact order. You will not call me, email me, text me, or contact me through any third party. You will not come within 500 feet of my home or any of my offices. As of this moment, we are no longer family. We are strangers. Am I clear?" Linda just sobbed, a dry, racking sound. Jason nodded, grabbed the pen, and signed his name. Linda, shaking, followed. They left. I never saw them in person again. Patrick Doyle was not so lucky. The board, furious at the regulatory exposure, threw him to the wolves. He was indicted on multiple counts of racketeering and conspiracy. He lost his severance, his stock, and his reputation. He became the example, the man whose greed and arrogance cost him everything, the system he thought he controlled, the one he thought was just numbers on a page, had ground him into dust. Jason, as the primary conspirator with the IP logs, was sentenced. He got the mandatory minimum, 5 years. As for my little account, I decided it needed a new purpose. I took the restitution money, added 10 million of my own, and created a new nonprofit foundation under the Helios umbrella. I called it the Little Account Foundation. Its sole purpose is to provide legal aid and financial protection for the elderly and vulnerable who are being exploited by their own families. The trap I set for my family became a shield for everyone else's. A year passed. Thanksgiving came again. I did not go to Maple Glen. I stayed in Chicago. I was in my new apartment, the one on the 82nd floor, the one I actually owned. It was not small. It was not a stage. It was just mine. I had a few people over, Marcus Hale and his wife, Amelia, a couple of old friends from my university days who had never once asked me for money. We ate turkey, we drank good wine, and we watched the lights of the city glitter below. No one talked about their bank accounts. My phone buzzed on the counter. An email. It was from a new, anonymous account, but I knew who it was from. The no-contact order didn't cover email. A tiny loophole she must have found. The subject was Thanksgiving. The message was one sentence. I hope your money keeps you warm. I looked at the message. I saw the bitterness, the pathetic, final jab, the belief that my money was a wall, not a tool, that I had chosen it over her. I thought about the 19-year-old girl in the dorm room. I thought about the foundation I had just built. I put the phone face down on the counter. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I didn't even delete it. It was just data. A final transaction. Logged and closed. The ledger was balanced. I picked up my wine glass and walked to the window. The wind was loud, whistling against the glass. But inside, it was quiet. I looked at the endless city, at the empire I had built, not of steel, but of rules and consequences. I raised my glass to my own reflection. Last Thanksgiving, I whispered. They emptied my little account. This year, an entire banking empire stands between me and anyone who ever thought they had a right to what is mine. And this time, I am thankful for one thing, and one thing only: boundaries. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad you were here to share it with me. What did you think? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and share our thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Boss Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.